That turned out looking so nice. Before we get started, I got a couple of sticker shout outs. First is Sean over at Smithson Creations. He sent some stickers in. And then Billy Burt over at the Messy Studio, and to hang out with Billy on the Hangouts from time to time. Anyway, I'll leave links to their social media presences in the doobly-doo below. And today we have an upcycling project. The other day I was driving through one of Sacramento's nicer neighborhoods and I saw a beautiful hand-carved bed frame laying on the roadside. And I thought, well, I can't just leave that there. I stopped, and it could never be returned to use as a bed because the side rails were broken. But what could be done with it is to upcycle it into a bench. That's today's project. Look at this beautifully carved wood. I hate to just throw this away, but this thing is falling apart. We'll start by just knocking it apart with a mallet. Now that's a pretty nice piece of wood, and you can tell this was hand carved. Alright, these legs are in pretty good shape, but this bridge piece that connects them is not so great, so I'm going to do a little bit of work on that. Yeah, and these places where the veneer is peeled and stuff, I'm just going to leave that, because I think people will like that. Now it's pretty clear that this is glued on, and I want to glue it onto the headboard because I love this carving, and I think it'll make a nice feature to put on the headboard with the other carving that's on it already. And there it is. Now that is one fine piece of craftsmanship, and I would just hate to see that go to the dump, which is where it was bound for. And look at this headboard. This is hand carved. Now I'm not going to say they don't make beds of this quality anymore, because they do. And I know somebody that does it. His name is Daniel Harju at the Country Bed Store. He's a good friend of mine, and I'll leave a link to his social media presence in the description below. Now I think that's going to be a real nice addition to that. Now we'll sand this off here so we can get a good glue joint going. Now in case you're wondering, the reason we're going to take this finish off is to expose the bare wood. That way the glue can actually penetrate the wood, because it won't penetrate this finish. And we'll just use a card scraper or a square, if you know what that is. So if you don't have enough clamps, just load up a bunch of weight on top of it, and it doesn't really matter what it is. Whatever's handy. Here I'm cutting down the bed rails to make new side rails for the bench. So we'll just come in with the router and enlarge this slot. After that, we'll cut mortises into all four legs, and those will accept the tenons from the new rails. That's a good slot. Now we'll just make matching tenons. Looking here, this is that backboard off the footboard, and you see this is where we need to cut it off to make it the right height for the bench. And that carved unit was right there. Luckily, on the other side, it still looks pretty good. I'll be able to face that out towards the people, and this should turn out looking pretty nice. Now since I've got a curved surface, I can't just go up against the fence. So I'm going to have to kind of freehand it. Now this is really pretty dangerous. You don't want to do this if you don't have to. In the original rendition, this panel just floated inside this groove around here, but that's not going to be the case anymore. So I'm just going to come in here, and along the back side I'm going to scrape the finish off, and we'll apply some glue to glue it in. All right, so this is going to be the front of our bench. And we're probably going to cut these off up here, but for right now we're just going to leave them in place because we're not sure what we're going to do with the arms. We'll figure it out as we go. So we routed out a mortise with the router. Now we need to cut these down so they'll fit inside the mortise. And if we put them at this height, that's a good height and it ties in nicely with the rest of the carving. But then the top of our sideboard is down here, which is like 4 or 5 inches below the top of the seat. So we're going to have to figure a way to fill this gap. And the way I think we'll probably end up doing it is using the other runner board and just cut a piece that we can lay in here alongside it. But for right now, we'll just cut these down and make them fit inside the mortise. Now to narrow this down, we'll just come in here on the table saw. I've got the blade set to trim just enough off, and we'll take several passes and narrow this down. And I want to preserve this face because that will tie in with the existing finish. Because I'm not going to fully refinish this. I'm basically just going to go over it with scratch coat at the end to kind of tie it all together. Okay, now looking at our mortise and our tenon, we do a test fit here, and it's pretty tight. Have a look here where it's compressed the wood. The wood is kind of shiny right there. Now we don't want that because if it's too tight, it'll squeeze all the glue out and there won't be any structural integrity. We want just a little bit of room for some glue. So we'll come in and widen the mortise in the areas where the tenon was too tight. That one's looking all right. And I think that's going to be a pretty good look. So now we'll fit the other side to the headboard. One thing we don't have to worry about is the alignment, because we know that the top of the mortise is the same on both the headboard and the footboard. So I'll just bring this line straight across here, and that'll be the top of our tenon also. So I don't make mention of my tools a lot, but I did want to point out this thing here. It's called a S.A.S.E vise, and they were made under a bunch of different names. They're made in Germany or something like that. I find them used at yard sales for $5 to $10. If you ever see one, grab it. They are worth having. Because look at this. I just happen to have 2 of them. So I was able to clamp the headboard into position on top of my bench. Now I can assemble the whole bench and make sure all the feet are on the same flat surface. Now I wish I had some handy tips on how to use one of these clamps, but this thing is a battle for me every time I use it. Now one thing we need to do is we need to build up this side here, because don't forget the bottom of the seat is going to be here and we don't want a big gap in there. This is the other half of that runner. I ripped it off on the table saw, and I'm gonna take some cuts here and see if I can kind of cobble these 2 ends together. Okay, so this required so much different cutting and fitting that I just did the whole thing off camera. These are a couple of pieces off the other runners, and I just cut. First I cut out a cardboard template, and then I cut them to fit. And there's a little bit of gap going on, but I don't care. I think it's going to be just fine. I'll just run some screws in to hold these in place, and then we'll just move on. Okay, I put a floor in here to give this thing a little bit of storage. Now all that's left is to bridge the top here with something. I think 3/4 plywood is what I'm going to use, and then we'll put a couple of cushions on there, sand off and color the discolored spots. See what it looks like from there. Well, this is nice and solid, but there are some issues. Yeah, if you take a look here and here, the interface is not that straight because I wasn't going to carve that in. So one thing I think I'll do is I'm going to stuff these little cracks with wood filler. One last thing to do is upholstery. And I'm not sure what to do about that. I'm thinking I'll go hit the upholstery store, get some high density foam, glue it onto this. Okay, so I went down to my local rubber supply and I found this piece of closed cell foam. This is super tough stuff, very comfortable, way better than anything you will find at any fabric or upholstery store. This is industrial rubber that is used for anything but upholstery, but that's what I'm using on my stuff. Okay, and look at this fabric I found. I think this is perfect to match those ornate wood carvings. Now there's actually a way to do this. What you should do is make a pattern, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is just make the pattern on the fabric. So anyway, the way you do this is you cut it out from the back. So now that we have our top done, what we're going to do is we're going to come around here with another strip and make like a curtain that hangs down over the edge. We'll first pin the two together with straight pins, then we will sew the curtain onto the top, turn it inside out, then slip it over the seat and staple it on. Okay, we transitioned into the bike room, which is where I keep my sewing machine. This thing is cut out right, pinned together. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it large, try it on, and then come in and probably sew it again. Okay, so we've got it all sewn. We'll flip it over, turn it inside out, see what it looks like. And by some stroke of luck, I got all the stuff facing the front. We're still in the front, and you know, that is not too bad. In fact, I think I'm going to just turn this over and staple it right the way it is. We'll just pull it up snug and staple it on the bottom. Someone is really going to love this. So we are in the home stretch with this thing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this with a coat of stain and wipe the stain back off just to kind of fill in the scratches a little bit and give it a kind of renew the finish a little bit. Alright, so that stain was a great idea. That turned out looking so nice. And check out this funky fabric that I found. Now my best guess on the age of that piece is about 100 years. Judging by the type of construction used to make it, I'm thinking it was probably like 1920 to 1940. So based on the likely age of the bed and the neighborhood where I picked it up, odds are this was a family heirloom that may have had quite a bit of sentimental value, except it was a broken bed, and what do you do with a broken bed? Throw it away. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to the house where I picked up the bed in the first place and let them see the bench and offer them the first chance to buy it. Because as I said, that bed may have been a family heirloom that they hated to part with, but they just didn't know what to do with it when it was broken. And if you want to see the result of that endeavor, find me on Instagram. My name there is wildman.tech. Anyway, that's all for this time. Thanks for stopping in. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Click up here to see my last video. Click over here to see something of mine that YouTube thinks you'll like. And have a good one.